Conor Forde and Sandra Quinn. Thank you very much for coming along today to chat to me about your experiences of making career choices. You've both had changes of direction, changes of focus in your career. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, I suppose, what's inspired you around those junctions and ultimately what you've learned about what a great career choice is. So first and foremost, I guess I'd love to just get a sense for you about how important self-reflection has been in terms of the career choices that you've made. So Sandra, for you, from going from accountant auditor into industry and onto the world of recruiting, how important is you taking time to self-reflect being in making those choices along the way?
I don't think I did a huge amount of self-reflection, really. I probably do a lot more now than I ever did. I think a lot of most people's careers, there's a lot of luck, there's a lot of chance, there's a lot of people helping you out or meeting people at the right time. And just even talking about it, even things like this, like as you say, your career and what you do every day for, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day is so important to the rest of your life that I think thinking self-reflection is good, and talking about it with people who might be able to help you is a good thing as well. I don't think I did enough of it, so I definitely do advise people now to do a lot more and to strategically think about where they're at all the time. So yeah, not a huge amount, but as I said, definitely I will be doing more from now on, I think.
Yeah, and before I go to Conor, to you on that same question, just Sandra, you say you may be doing more now. What self-reflection do you see yourself doing more of versus, say, when perhaps in the past you might have seen yourself doing less?
I think now it's a lot more, I absolutely love what I'm doing, but I do it around my life. And that's like, I happen to have kids, but I always say to people it's not just about having kids. It's about whether you go horse riding or you do gardening or whatever you want to do with your time. You have to make sure that your career works around that and is part of it, so that everything sort of merges together as opposed to being in separate sections. People talk about work-life balance. I hate that phrase, to be honest. I think that if you can find something that makes you happy, you don't really consider it work. Everything merges together a little bit better, but still with boundaries to keep yourself sane, I suppose, and not, working too much.
You, Conor, right? Sandra has mentioned, I suppose, priorities like outside priorities, family, hobbies, etc., and happiness as well. In terms of those two things, particularly just like pursuit of happiness, how much has that been a feature in terms of your choices around chef, accountant, auditor, industry? How important has the pursuit of happiness been in terms of the choices that you've made?
Yeah, it's a good question, John. I think fundamentally, I think that's kind of core to your decision-making process. I mean, like Sandra made a really good point in that, chance is a key sort of component of all these decisions. I guess, like, my view on career is that, it's almost a fluid process. Like, you're not making, at the time of making a decision, it feels as though you're making it in some kind of vacuum. You're trying to just deal with the pertinent facts. But I think as I've grown a little bit older, I've started to think about some of the periphery factors in and around there. So yeah, I mean, to be topical, like obviously what's going on at the moment, nobody could have foreseen that. But I mean, life is like this in many ways. Sandra mentioned she has some kids, like various things can happen in your life, moving country and so on. And so I think like boiling a career decision down into like a nuclear decision is not the way to go. You've got to keep being rational about the process and, not completely emotional. Think about what can change. Like, not to get too philosophical, but I read something about 10 years ago, this article, right, by this guy, Charlie Munger, his name was. I think he's like the vice chairman to Warren Buffett. And I was just reading on an airplane or whatever, and they were asking about his decision-making process, et cetera, his career. And he said, upon reflection, like him and Warren often talk about, there's only 6 or 7 like decisions that you make in your life that actually are going to change the path of your life. Right? So, a lot of other decisions are just like noise, small factors that seem like they're big at the time. You know, if I decide to sell my car next week, it's not, and like I could procrastinate over that and think about all manner of things, if it's the right price, etc. But I just think like I've tried to move my mindset into that sort of space when thinking about my career. When you spoke about happiness, like yeah, like I've had a number of different careers. Like you mentioned chef, you probably left out like bricklayer, plumber, no, crane driver. No, like I've kind of, in some ways, I've gone with what I enjoy doing at the time, you know. And you know, yeah, people think about that speech by Steve Jobs, the sort of famous Stanford one where he talks about connecting the dots. And I think you only truly start to believe that when you see it happen in your own life, you know, that things that you've paid attention to or done for a small amount of time do start joining up ultimately along the way. And so, yeah, not to hog the microphone, but I just think like there's many factors in play, that your career is a fluid state. Yeah. And so is your mental health, so is your life, so is everything around you. Yeah. And so I think just being cognizant of those features can help in the process.
Fantastic. I didn't know about the bricklayer and plumber, but
they're not on my CV.
No, they're not. Yeah. So here's a piece that I'd love to pick up on this whole idea of paying attention. Conor, you said that, you know, there's certain things if you pay attention to, like, that they can have a positive influence in the choices you make. Maybe to Sandra first, and I'll come back to you again, Conor. Sandra, what, for anyone here who's considering making a career choice, based on your personal experience and also the experience that you have professionally, like what things do you advise and encourage people to pay attention to so that they can make a good career choice for themselves?
Oh, the people. It's like the roles that I work are generally, and in my own career as well, it's 95% fit. If you can, the company is important, what you do is important, all of those different things. But if there isn't good relationships between you and the people you report to and your team, you're not going to want to go to work on a Monday morning. And you mentioned happiness. Like it's so important to, now not everyone is lucky enough to be able to find something they love to do. But when you are making decisions and you are looking at different options, you have to consider the team you will spend most of your time with. So you do, as you said at the beginning, you spend more time at work than you do anywhere else at all. So people have to find a group of people that they like to spend time with. Now, they don't have to go for pints with them all the time. They don't have to be best friends. And there's need to be an assertiveness between everyone that if there is an issue, it can be sorted. But ultimately, I think the people is absolutely key.
Okay.
That's the first thing I think of.
Brilliant, Sandra. And I think what that point really highlights is the need for people then. Oh, sorry, another question perhaps to and I'll come back to you on this one, is how important is doing your homework on things like the people you might be working with. I might just ask you to reflect on that one for a sec, because I would love to say, Conor, just on that paying attention piece, before we come back to that question to Sandra, if you were to say two things that people should pay attention to so that they can make a great career choice, what would you say those two things are?
Okay, I'd say the first one is, like, for me personally, I don't know if it relates to everybody, but it would be just the role that the ego plays in the process. And, you know, okay, so what do I mean by that? Yeah, I think like you can be attracted to certain roles or positions because of how you think it might reflect to people that, you know, matter to you. Mm-hmm. And I think that it can sometimes lead to a bad decision-making process. All right. So I think like you need to try to remove sort of the ego out of the process. Somebody once said to me, you know, how would you feel if you went into, you know, your two current bosses and you said, I'm leaving to go be, I don't know, gardener or something like that, just something completely unrelated. And it really made me think, like, because I kind of felt like a sick feeling in my stomach. Like I just thought, what would they think of me? And I think that's just like, I think that feeds into a lot of people's psyche, like what people will think of the next role they're taking, how will that look, How does it reflect on them? What will be said about them? So I try to just stay core to my principles, my beliefs, and what I want out of the role, whether it makes me happy, and that's a fundamental thing. And so yeah, so the ego.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I learned along the way from a particularly good coach I had was that this is a bit of a nomenclature, but like to set up a professional boardroom, they called it professional boardroom. Okay, so they said to me, okay, think of all the decisions in your life, right? So it might be relationship things, I don't know, sports, that type of thing. You kind of have a go-to person in your circle that you ask about that. Oh, they're quite understanding, they're quite empathetic, I might ask them about this for advice. And this person suggested that I think about who my professional boardroom is. So who are the people that will give me an unbiased, genuine opinion based on what they know about me, and not like try to coax me or coerce me into something. And like it didn't take a lot of thinking, it comes to mind pretty quickly, because you kind of know those people. They're the mentors, that the people can give that unbiased view. And so when I have gone back to those folks in my professional boardroom, as I'll call it, what I'll do is I'll take their advice, because it's an opinion of me that I might not be aware of, that they know. And then ultimately I'll put that through my own, let's call it, filtration process. I'll let that flow through me as a person. I'll listen to all the sound bites. I'll listen to the pros and cons. I'll listen to what they tell me to stay away from, what they think a person like me might do well at. And then, it's about knowing yourself then ultimately. So the two would be, just the ego, be aware of it, how it feeds into the process, how it affects you, your decision-making process, and good or bad. And then, just try to establish or think about those people that you're going to go to for advice, not for ultimately what you want to hear, but for what you think what insights they'll provide.
I love those things, and we might touch on that piece about who you think is a good person to get advice on in a sec. Just to come back to that one, Sandra, just on, you mentioned, like, you were saying that sounds like really getting into the role and trying to understand what the choice looks like. How important is information and really understanding what you're considering to be able to make a good choice in your experience?
I think it's and as Conor was saying as well, there's people that you need to get information from that will, as you said, Conor, know you better, so you take that on board. But we'll say, when I'm talking to candidates about clients for a potential job, I often use the line that I should know what my clients eat for breakfast. Like, I literally need to know as much as I possibly can, because what I'm trying to do is not just match a job and a spec. I'm trying to match two people together for a substantially long time. And I need to know that those two people will get on well and will match. And there's some types of companies and some places where I have information that I know where the candidate might not like it for one reason or another, and another candidate could absolutely love it. So what I would say to candidates a lot is, and not only who would do it with me, I tell them across the board when they're considering their career and choices they're making, to, get a lot of information from as many people as they can. Find out if they know people who worked in a business, or as much as they can about the person they'll report to, and all different things, but to do their own due diligence as well when they're in the interview, to make sure that they're almost interviewing the employer as well, in a way, that it's more of a meeting than an interview, because you have to understand, you have to get to know more about these people that you will spend so much time with. So I think as much background information as people can get is very important, but that can backfire sometimes, because, as I said, for some people, one job is perfect and another person could completely hate that job. So if they're asking that particular person for advice, they might give them advice that's not correct, because they could thrive in an environment maybe that's a little bit tougher for somebody else. But what Conor was saying as well about the boardroom, that's a great concept, actually. I've never heard of that before. But again, for me, when I left being a chartered accountant, after putting all the work in it for years and years in practice and then years in industry, to go to recruitment, a lot of people didn't understand that, because that was 10 years ago, and there wasn't as many accountants in finance recruitment as there is now. So I had to make sure that I was listening to the right people, and that I was going with my gut, and that I wasn't just looking at, oh, well, I've done all this work to be an accountant, I have to stay an accountant forever, because I knew that would make me miserable.
Yeah.
So I had to block out a lot of advice that I felt wasn't right at the time. Thankfully, wasn't right at the time. So.
Yeah. And to your point, Sandra, about like being able to block it out and being able to understand it, like the questions coming up in my mind now is, how do you, and maybe Conor will put this to you, is how do you know who's the right person? Because like there's many people that we can go to look for advice. How would you know, what advice do you give to someone who's watching this to say how to pick the right person to seek advice for around a career choice?
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. You have to kiss a few frogs. Like, it really depends on like who, like over time, who has shown that they're a trusted resource to you, who provides, they're not self-orientated, they're not, like, they'll tell you the truth, good, bad, and the ugly. I always think that people that will tell me like what doesn't suit me, like they are the people to start listening to, because they're going to be honest with you. They're not just going to pay some lip service. Look, you can't just pick them out. They emerge slowly over time, and you get to know who they are. I don't think there's like a checklist or anything that you need to go through. Like equally, somebody that's constantly paying you compliments and so on, they can be not as difficult to like, but they can sometimes give you the wrong steer, if you want, because they think well of you, they think high of you, and sometimes they aren't willing to tell you what you're not quite that good at or what might not suit you. So there's no cut and fast way of work. You just you build it up over time. They're the people that are there at the end of a phone call when you need them. And I just think, what's that? There's a phrase now it's just come into mind. I haven't rehearsed this, but I think it's when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So like depending on what you're going through, sometimes somebody will appear in your life that has done that or has been through something similar. And it's just about keeping an open mind and being aware of that process.
Thanks, man. And I just encourage anyone, if they have a question that they'd like to ask, you can send me a quick message directly in the chat. Happy to ask on your behalf. Sandra, patience. How important is patience for someone when it comes to trying to make a good career choice? In a world where we've become expectant of getting things quick and easy, like technology has kind of created that mindset in us. What's your sense on patience and making good career choices?
I think it goes back to what Conor was saying about relationships. Like obviously I'm looking at it all from a recruiter, and I have people sometimes who come to me and they'll say they want to leave their job, it's not right, they're ready to move, and they'll jump at anything, and that's never good. Now, if the right opportunity is there in front of you, yes, of course you have to go for it then. But generally, it should be a gradual progression, and it goes to the relationship. Like, I don't like to get to know someone straight away when I have a job and put them into it, because that just doesn't work. I much prefer much longer relationships that go over years, so then I know the candidate and the client very well, and I know what will work. But people have to not wait for the right thing, but just put time and effort into everything, and it's easier to go to interviews now because people don't have to leave their house, but generally they have to wait for the right thing, because if they waste too much time going for the wrong thing, when the right thing comes along, they don't have the capacity, especially when most people are working full time when they're looking for a new role. They can't put their present job at risk trying to get a new one. So I don't like to see people run after everything and waste that energy. And then when the best job comes along, they're not ready to give that 150% to be able to get it.
Yeah. Makes absolute sense. And the other question that's coming up in my mind is like to know like I'm getting a sense of just knowing when it's the right one, waiting, and two, knowing when the right one has come and where it is. For me, awareness is going to be a feature of that. Like, so having a sense of self-awareness as to what will work. And I guess, Conor, how important have you found self-awareness to be in relation to making a good career choice?
It's critical, right? And so, just a couple of things. Like, so self-awareness as a human being, and then self-awareness as a professional. Okay, they're kind of interlinked. You know, you do get to know, I suppose, where your strengths and weaknesses are. You know, everybody has strengths and weaknesses. Everybody has development points. There's no getting away from that. And I think, you know, even knowing those facts can, I suppose, help you in the decision-making process. Like, I've taken a kind of varied career, right, as you've called out, and it zigzagged a little bit. You know, and I think back to when I was a chef. You know, you're talking 20 years ago here, I worked in some, you know, quite serious kitchens and stuff. Okay, but you learn some stuff about yourself. And one of the things that jumped out was that one of the chefs I used to work with, you know, when you were a junior chef, you used to have to wear a blue apron, you know, like the butcher's apron. And that was because only the head chef didn't have to wear that, right? And so this head chef wore it, like he wore it out of respect, like, and I asked him one day, why do you wear the blue apron still? And he said, because I'm continually learning. I might be the head chef of this kitchen, but I am continually learning. And that kind of stuck with me. Like, and so I think like when I'm quite a reflective person, and when I look at some of my career choices, some of the doors they've opened, some of the avenues and so on, I think, like, I heard this phrase on a podcast recently. It was along the lines of, you know, as the area of your knowledge grows, so too does the perimeter of your ignorance, right? So you're constantly accumulating knowledge and wealth, but with that, more and more fields are opening to you. So I think, like, for me personally, the fact that I'm always learning from every role and I'm taking nuggets away with me onto the next part of the journey, I think that was a huge piece of self-awareness for me, not to get too inverted in the process in my mind. You know, a lot of friends and good colleagues and stuff have taken quite linear careers. You know, they've just gone like a rocket ship, just straight as a die. And they've enjoyed that, and they've enjoyed getting the deep sectoral knowledge, you know. And I think for me, I know in myself, I take that blue apron mindset with me along the way, that I just want to continually learn about new and more things, new technology and so on. And, you know, around the patience, I think Sandra called it, like, there is a tipping point where you're coming into a decision-making process. But I think definitely, like, as I suppose, more junior in my career, I didn't, you know, the concept of delayed gratification just didn't come into it. You know, I just wanted the next jump, and I wanted the next pay rise, and I didn't want to, you know, it was just give me the thing now. Whereas now, through mentorship, through coaching, through friends, through constant dialogue, and just meeting great people along the way, I think, like, that, I think that's generated a lot of, you know, professional self-awareness within me. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. And so that learning and awareness seem to be intertwined there for you. We've hit our time. So how quickly has this gone? Sandra and Conor, could I ask you, if you were to sum up in a simple phrase, what is the advice that you want the people who are here and the people who watch and record, what's the advice that you'd want to leave in one phrase? What would it be around making a good career choice? Sandra, to you first, please.
I'd probably use one word. I think you have to find a passion for something. And if you can find something that gets you up in the morning and makes you happy, and, you know, you have the bonus getting paid to do it, that's a pretty good day's work, I think, to me. So I think passion is something that's very important.
Fantastic, Sandra. Thank you. Conor?
Yeah, mine is, I suppose, not to be corny or cliche, but like be true to yourself. Like, drop all the narrative around that you've built around yourself of who you think you are, and just get to the core of what you enjoy and what makes you happy. and try to, yeah, I suppose it links to Sandra's point around passion. It's not, yeah, I haven't, I used to dread the question in school about what do you want to be when you grow up, and I still dread that question. So I think I think just be true to yourself, try to understand who you are and what makes you tick, and I think that's a great starting point.
Sandra, Quinn and Conor Forde, thank you so much for your time. It certainly feels to me like we've only just got started and yet our time has elapsed. I really appreciate you taking the time. I hope people get as much value as I've got from listening to you. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, John. Thanks for being a great host.
And I'm
looking forward to the podcast version.
Absolutely. So